So, did you hear the joke about the clouds?
No.
Don't worry about it. It's over your head.
Boom. Got it.
Welcome back to the Working on the Dad Pod. I am Alex. With me, as always, is Ethan. And tonight we are talking about traditions. We're in the middle of October, but it's not too soon to think about the holidays, which is usually a time full of traditions. I'm going to bring up a tradition later that I'm actually going to be practicing before the holidays and some other fun stuff. Before that, just a couple of housekeeping notes. On Halloween night, we're not going to be recording. Going to be trick-or-treating, so that's 2 weeks away. Next week, we're going to have a pre-recorded episode where we're doing a candy draft because I will be out of town. I'll explain that later. It's the same thing I said I would mention earlier. It's a tradition. But tonight, we are talking all about traditions. Before that, we'll, of course, have story time. And after that, we'll be working on the dad bod as Ethan sips his calories in a cup.
Yep.
Before all that, I want to remind you to like and subscribe, do all that stuff. We're on Spotify, we're on Apple Podcasts, but most of all, we're on YouTube. When you want to see our beautiful faces, or you just want to turn the sound on, minimize the window, that's super helpful. Tag a friend, leave a comment, like, subscribe, turn on that little bell for notifications, all the good stuff. Share it with somebody you know who you think might like or just hate listen to this podcast. Either way, that helps us. Ethan, how are you doing today?
I am okie dokie. No major home emergencies for me this week. Just kind of been doing my thing. However, my wife left this morning for New York Comic-Con with one of her girlfriends. They haven't had a chance to go together in a couple of years, but they used to go pretty much the first few years that my wife and I knew each other. And that means it's a solo dad weekend, me and the girls. Started last night, or it started today with swim lessons. And the younger one, not sure why she couldn't run around the pool the whole time. So there was a lot of back and forth on strapping her in the stroller and letting her walk and hold my hand. But, you know, we were okay. We got through it. And just trying to make it work. My story is not so much a story, but just something fun I wanted to mention today. That little one has started singing songs a lot now that she can talk a little bit more. And I walked in to the older daughter's room today, and she was sitting there waiting for my older daughter and myself to come in. And she is just in her cute little baby voice singing Obla Di Obla Da by the Beatles, that little old soul of Gen Alpha. And it was very cute. My daughter's taste in music is, I guess, would be the same as if you and I were listening to jazz regularly. They very much enjoy what was on the Golden Oldies station when we were kids. So it's very fun listening to music with them when they're requesting the Beach Boys and the Beatles and the Rolling Stones sometimes. So it's very funny. Yeah. What about you? What's going on with you?
So this week, my wife and I goofed, right? So earlier this summer, right? I guess we're in fall now, but this summer, my wife and I switched health insurances because my wife went from full-time at the job that she had that provided benefits to part-time. And so we took on my health insurance. And under her health insurance, the kids had their routine eye exams and their dental covered by the health insurance. And we did not realize that was not covered by my health insurance, that it was a separate thing. We signed ourselves up for the vision and we signed ourselves up for the dental, but we did not sign up the kids. And my daughter got her routine eye check that they give at public schools, and her prescription is not doing well enough in her right eye. She still failed the test in her right eye, and the kids had their dentist appointment this morning. And so Luckily, open enrollment's around the corner. We'll be able to rectify it, but we did have to pay cash for the dental visit. Luckily, there's a medical insurance loophole where if it is an emergency, and I think not being able to see, having a verified eye exam that shows you can't see, and needing an updated prescription, the optometrist was pretty confident that they could just put in a different code, call it an emergency, and get it covered. But this is just a friendly reminder that to not just assume that all medical coverage is the same, assuming that's something you have for your family, assuming you maybe have options if you're ever switching. And with open enrollment coming up, just a PSA to check all the fine details, because while we were under the correct assumption that the Affordable Care Act mandates those things be covered for kids, it is not mandated if the employer offers it separately for the children. And so that was just kind of the loophole where my health insurance company was like, listen, there's nothing we can do. I wasn't, going crazy on them or anything. I was just kind of asking. And luckily, we do contribute to a healthcare FSA. So we were able to just put it on that, when paying the cash price.
Sure.
For it. And to save, because health insurance and dental insurance and all these insurances and the pricing structure is absolute hogwash. We saved over $100 per kid by not having the 30-second fluoride treatment.
There you go.
Yeah, that's just heinous in my opinion. But
Yeah,
worth the $10 a month to add them on when we can do that starting on January 1st. So that was our goof this week. But
yeah.
teeth are healthy.
So,
that's what matters.
so you know what I learned about eye care in particular? Ophthalmologists take medical insurance. Optometrists take vision insurance.
I've never gone to an ophthalmologist, but that kind of makes sense because ophthalmologists are like qualified for like surgery, right? Because they're sort of a grade above. No shade to shade to optometrists, but there's like opticians, optometrists, and ophthalmologists sort of in that order, going up the rankings of like what they are actually qualified to diagnose and treat. And so a lot of times if you have more serious conditions that may require more extensive procedures, it's often recommended. Like my mom goes to an ophthalmologist. I don't know that she necessarily needs it, but she really appreciates it, just being thorough. But I did learn all that because I used to do social media videos for the optometrist that my kids see. So we did a lot of like Q&A style videos where he answered a lot of those questions so that people could know more about the process.
Sure. Yeah. So I go to an ophthalmologist because I have a family history of early onset glaucoma. So I get that checked in my annual eye exam, but I then had to make a separate appointment with an optometrist to get a new prescription of glasses. So
and I think, not to dispense too much medical advice here, but I do think it is one of those things where it's worth checking sort of what and how different practitioners check things, right? Like the optometrist that I go to and my kids go to, he does a really good job, and he also has like some advanced imaging machines so that he can actually look for those things and see those signs, and he's completely qualified to check for a lot of those conditions. It's more on the actual like treatment side of things, what they're qualified to render as treatments, but he can go so far as like early detection of cancer or diabetes because it shows up in the eye a lot of times more before it shows up other places in the body. And like it can be a really weird position for somebody going, hey, my vision's a little fuzzy, and going, you have diabetes. And it's like, that's not what I walked in here for, but
right.
So anyway,
well, that's fun.
So we are past that, but we are partaking in some traditions coming up. So the reason, one of the traditions that we have, and I guess we should sort of start at the beginning, why they're important. I mean, I think people basically know this. I don't want to get too elementary on people on why they know it. Like if you grew up with family traditions, you remember those in one of two ways, either with nostalgia or disdain, right? Like you remember the traditions that your family had, and sometimes you thought they were a giant burden, and sometimes you thought they were the greatest thing and they were unique and they made your family special. And I think as parents, as dads, we have a really key role in shaping that, because I don't think all the traditions, I think there's a lot of like grandiose traditions, when you think about annual stuff that you might do around like really important holidays, for you guys, like the Jewish high holidays, for us, Christmas or Easter or something like that. But then I think there's smaller traditions that you can have throughout your childhood and your kids' childhood that can just have a really big impact on the relationship, right?
Mhm.
In very positive ways. And so we're gonna get into some of those, but I guess we should maybe start small with
Sure.
the daily or weekly traditions that we might, because I don't think they have to be gigantic
No.
things. But did you want to go first in naming some of the
Sure.
naming a
Yeah.
smaller tradition that you guys love?
Yeah. So Saturday morning farmers market has just kind of been a staple of my family's week, dating back to when my wife was working on Saturdays, and I needed to do something to get the girls out of the house for a couple of hours every Saturday morning, just so I could make it to nap time and not go insane.
Sure.
And the weekly farmers market has just become truly, honestly, like the one thing I look forward to every week is I go to the pop-up bagel shop and I get
That's
it's
so
sad, but
sad, man.
it's sad, but the cheddar bagel with the candied salmon schmear is just me. Like when I take that bite, means I kind of like made it through the week. I made it through work. I made it through morning 2 hours of ballet, and I kind of just know that in the next couple minutes the girls are gonna nap, and I hopefully get to just watch some football. So taking a bite of that sandwich usually means that it's about to be a moment of bliss. And that is why, to me, the farmer's market, the bagel that comes with it, and the walking around with all of the alcohol vendors I now am on a first name basis, we have a little thing. I'm the dad with two girls whose wife has just recently come out of the woodwork. No, not recently, but it's just very funny. That's our big weekly tradition that means the most to me. So, what about you?
So I have two traditions that are either on a daily or weekly basis, and I know the first one's going to sound corny because you guys have heard this a million times, but taking my kids to the gym, right? And it's sort of like, oh, how does that connect to them because you're dropping them off at childcare? But it's a thing when my kids walk in there, because of where we go to the YMCA, and everybody's super friendly there, and everybody knows my kids by name, and they say hi to them, and they walk in, and it's like walking across, there's like one of those handicap buttons to auto open the door, and my son loves pressing it, and he may have pressed it too hard because it was out of service for like 2 weeks, and he just smacks the heck out of that thing, and I'm like, that might have been him. But just the trainers will like go out of their way, they'll be training somebody, they'll be like, hey man, and like say my son's name and talk to him, and he's all shy and like running. And they said it to my daughter when she was going there in the mornings too. She goes there after school, they still see her, but it just sort of becomes one of those things. And yesterday or 2 days ago, my son was with my mother-in-law all day, and they were playing make believe. Because my son's finally gotten to the age where he really wants to play make believe. And he's like, I'll be daddy, you be the kid. Okay, we're going to go to school. But first, we have to go to the gym. We're going to go to the gym. We got to work out. And so like that tradition had like makes it into his make believe, where it's like one of the things that he wants to talk about and be about and do. He also had another one that was like, okay, I be daddy, you be the kids. You take a bath, I watch baseball. And I was like, okay, maybe, like sometimes I'll prop up a chair because I can see the TV if I'm sitting outside the bathroom window or bathroom door, and just sort of be like, Everybody good? All right. And, flip on some baseball.
like
So
that.
maybe that one, maybe that one should go away a little bit. But the second one is not actually that. It's one from my childhood that I'd actually like to start doing more with my kids. And when I was a kid, my parents got divorced when I was about 4 years old. And even before that, my dad would always take me out once a week to dinner for guys' night out, boys' night out. And he, coached me up as I'm like a little 2-year-old. We'd go to this place called Dick and Jane's Cafe, and he'd coach me up. And the waitress would say, like, "How you doing? What you up to?" And I'd be like, "Drinking beer and chasing chicks," right? Because my dad had coached me up that was the thing that we were out there doing. But that continued through high school, right? I moved away to college, and it was not feasible anymore after that. But through the time I graduated high school, every Thursday night, I went out to dinner with my dad. And I thought it was really awesome because I saw plenty of my mom, right? It was just me and her in the house. But with my dad, it was one-on-one time where he was like, into talking to me and catching up with me, where like the time I spent with my mom, and it's no shade to her, it was like getting dinner on the table and doing all the things. Oh, we've lost Ethan. But it was doing all the things that, we needed to do to get ready for the next day, whether that's laundry or whether that's making sure I did my homework, like all those kind of administrative things were what my mom and I had to do. But with my dad, it was just this really awesome one-on-one time. And I had plenty of those with my mom, but it wasn't like this pre-scheduled every week. I knew I was going to get that. And so that was really great. And we're back with Ethan. So I was just finishing up talking about guys' night out and how it was a really special time between me and my dad because it was that devoted time. And so that's something that I want to do with my kids as I don't even say they get a little bit older. My daughter's old enough now. My son's frankly old enough now. And when I do take them for one-on-one time, it's pretty awesome. It's just not as structured and predictable. And I think that when you're building traditions, sometimes we talked about it last week, but keeping to a rigid structure all the time can be a little detrimental, but at the same time, giving them something to look forward to, a daddy-daughter date, a guy's night out can be something that, can boost their mood and get them out of a funk. Maybe they had a bad day at school, but it's just like, I get daddy time or mommy time tonight. And that can be really awesome.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I'm sorry that when you talked about your parents splitting up and then you and your dad having this time together was right as I bolted. I realized that was fortuitous or inopportune, actually. So technical difficulties.
A pack of cigarettes and some Lottos, yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. No, that was a funny story for after the session. Anyway, so that actually got me thinking about a tradition that I used to do with my dad, and I've actually carried it on with my daughter, my older daughter, and my younger daughter is usually there just by happenstance. But my dad and I used to go to a special movie theater that my dad used to be a member of for screenings of special of movies. And until I was about 10, there was a Dairy Queen right around the corner from it. And around the time I was 10, Dairy Queen disappeared. And there were like no more Dairy Queens in Los Angeles. And it was very sad. Yeah. So pretty much anytime my dad and I were in the car together, we happened to see a Dairy Queen. We could have just been coming from getting ice cream. We would stop and get Dairy Queen. It wasn't even a discussion. We got Dairy Queen. And this last summer, when my family and another family went to Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, right on the boardwalk, there is a Dairy Queen. And I saw it and I turned, and obviously my dad was not there. So I turned to my daughter and I said, "Hey, we're getting Dairy Queen. And she said, what's Dairy Queen? And I said, oh boy. So then, we were at the beach for 3 days, and every day we walked by, she was like, I want Dairy Queen. I want Dairy Queen. I want Dairy Queen. So I did let her have it every day because we were only on vacation, and, she never really finished it. But now every once in a while, if she remembers that Dairy Queen exists, we'll usually go get ice cream. Granted, there's not a Dairy Queen close to us, but the concept of Dairy Queen has lived on in the Alpern father-child zeitgeist, and that has been really fun. So thank you for making me remember that.
Do you ever have your wife suggest Dairy Queen to your daughter so you don't look fat in front of her?
No, that is only something I do when you and I are living together and going through a health kick, but me wanting to have the Dairy Queen. So me asking our other roommate to suggest it so that it didn't look like my idea.
I'm just glad I could be a father figure in your life.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
So that brings me to, there's sort of, we talk about like the small ones, and then I want to get into some of the holiday ones that we have, because I think those are kind of cool. But one of the ones that I'm really excited about that I prefaced earlier is the annual tradition that we've started with my daughter. It's going on 2 years now, but next week she and I will be going to San Francisco for her birthday. Last year, she went to New York with my wife for her birthday. And it's this tradition of basically, as we mentioned in the birthday parties episode that you can go back and listen to, birthday parties are not really something that we love doing. Making small talk with a bunch of school parents that we barely know or are meeting for the first time, making sure, we've got food and entertainment and, stacking it up when like some of my kids' classmates, the parents rented out the entire freaking water park on a Friday evening. I'm like, how do you compete with that? Like, that's crazy. And so instead of competing, we're just like, hey, do you want to take a trip? And my daughter, she loves traveling. And so boom, we started doing that. And I'm really looking forward to it, which is why we're pre-recording an episode for next week, because, I'm going to be on West Coast time and, frankly, not going to be able to record at an hour that Ethan's able to record. But I really like the idea of doing things. And I think we're going to start offering it to our son for maybe his 4th birthday or 5th birthday, somewhere in there, when we feel like he's ready for something like that. He's probably going to get a couple more years of standard issue birthday parties where we just invite the class. But, and who knows? It's one of those where I'm preparing myself to be heartbroken eventually when my little girl wants to be social and have the birthday party, or try to talk her way into both. I was about to use a less kind way of saying that, but try to talk her way into both.
Or talk you into paying for the trip, but you get substituted as the companion for one of her friends.
Yeah, that would be sort of like I don't know what age she would have to be for that.
Sure.
But I've seen Taken, and I'm not,
sure.
I'm not Liam Neeson. I don't have that particular set of skills. And, I'm not saying that that's what happens when they travel alone, but that's what I'd be worried about kind of constantly.
Sure.
But, she learns to handle herself. Great. Her mom, travels with some of her friends from time to time. So, it's not like I think that she can't eventually handle herself. But I'm imagining my 5-year-old right now, and I'm like, boy, you struggled taking off your clothes to get ready for bed. So it's hard to extrapolate that into sending her off on a plane by herself into a city to explore with another friend.
Sure.
Yeah. What about you?
Yeah. Well, the only other, there's 2 big family traditions that I guess matter. Well, I don't want to say that matter, but for me, it started when we went to college, where being Jewish, and the holidays changing, daily and me, or not annually. They're not always the same day on the American calendar as they are in the lunar Jewish calendar.
Right.
But it wasn't always easy going from Miami to LA just, for Rosh Hashanah or Passover, the same way one of our roommates did, where he'd pop up to New York from Miami. Sometimes he would drive it just to be there for the holidays. That is not something I was able to do.
Yeah.
But Thanksgiving was always the same time every year. And so every time
annually, but sure.
Yeah, but it's you're right. That does shift annually, but schools and work,
everybody has off. It's a national holiday.
Yes.
No difference. Yeah.
Right. So when I left for college, instead of in addition to traditional sides at the Thanksgiving table, my dad would start cooking our favorite home cooked meals. So Thanksgiving, had the turkey, the stuffing, the other meats, since none of us particularly like turkey in my family, and the pies. But there was also my dad's homemade mac and cheese. There was his homemade pesto sauce. There was, other stuff my brother liked that I can't remember. But what it was we were coming home, so we got our favorite home cooked meals. And still to this day, the annual trip to Los Angeles for us from DC as a family is Thanksgiving. And that is something that's really important to me. And, with most of my wife's family being local and them being more religious than my family is, they get all of the Jewish holidays traditionally. But when my aunt was still alive, who was local to me, we would also do the Jewish holidays, but we'd always just do it on a Sunday afternoon, because for her, it didn't actually have to be on the day. It was an excuse where all of us could not tell her, no, we can't come over. I was always going to go over, but, more like her sons were like, oh, Mom, I can't come right now. But, if it was a Jewish holiday adjacent weekend, then we'd always get together. And that was occasion sometimes where if my dad was going to come out visit here anyway, knowing his sister was hosting was another reason for him to come, and it became a bigger deal. So, yeah.
That's cool. Yeah, for us during the holidays, we have, quite a number of varied traditions, right? Because we live close to my mom and we live close to my in-laws, and my wife and I have added some traditions of our own. And so we kind of get this hodgepodge of some of the things my wife grew up with, some of the things that I grew up with, and some of the things, that we just wanted to do for ourselves. And so what that's led to is that between Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's, my mother-in-law always hosts Thanksgiving. It's her big thing. She's got the biggest house. She's got more family in the area. Like, her mom still lives locally, and her sister used to live down here with her two sons and would come. And so it just became a really big thing. And then we host Christmas, partly just logistics of the kids are the ones that are most hyped for the presents, and their stuff's going to be here and they're going to be in their pajamas here. So let's not try to shuffle all their stuff. Let's just have the grandparents, pack their stuff in the car the night before and then head out and come on over for brunch. And so we do sort of an extended brunch here, where we've adopted some traditions where we always have overnight oats and some fruit and some cold things to get people through the gifts. And then we always do a really nice chuck roast for the main, and actually have a sit down meal after we've done presents. But we've also adopted some other traditions that don't come from either my mom or my in-laws. One thing that my dad and my stepmom always did is my stepmom had just a plant in the garden that she would dig up and put in a pot every year, and that would be the Christmas tree. And then after Christmas, she'd go plant it back in the yard and let it grow and then pull it back up again. And it was this little bush. And we've got our Christmas tree right out here outside this door. It's like this little, I think it's called a Nordic pine or something like that. And it's, maybe as tall as me, but probably not. And we just move the pot inside every year. We water it and we put some ornaments on it. And it kind of looks like Charlie Brown's Christmas tree, but at the same time, it's something nice, and we like how sustainable it is, and kind of how low maintenance it is. So we really enjoy that. But on top of that, we also, have adopted a couple other things, with the kids, in terms of we've changed up the fact that, like, for my wife and myself, when we were growing up, all the presents were just sort of from Santa. Like, everything sort of came from Santa. And we've reverted to only stockings come from Santa, and anything that's wrapped and not in the stockings, that's from whoever gave it. And part of that really has nothing to do with our family, but more of like understanding that our kids are going to meet other kids in their life who celebrate Christmas but don't have the same means. And so they may not get all the same things. And we don't want our kids going around and being like, Santa got me a new bicycle and a basketball hoop and a trampoline. But instead, just like the little things, that way, if they're comparing with their friends who have less, their friends who also believe in this mythical guy who's rewarding naughty and nice kids, sit there and go, well, why doesn't he like me as much? And, trying to not, create this jealousy or this hurt or those kinds of things unintentionally, because I don't think anybody that's ever told their kid all the gifts are from Santa was doing it to make some other kid feel bad. It's just not thinking about that kind of thing. So, yeah.
So I need to take a little Santa segue. So when I was in preschool, the kids were talking about Santa, and being Jewish, I came home and I asked my parents, who's Santa? And my mom said, a made-up person who parents say gives them Christmas presents, but it's really them. So the next day I went to preschool, and Christmas was around the corner. Kids were talking, and I said, hey, my mom says Santa's made up. So my mom that day got about 5 phone calls from angry parents saying, why are you telling your kid that Santa isn't real, and having him tell my kid that Santa isn't real? So because of that, I told my wife back when we were dating, I was like, hey, we are not going to be the ones that ruin Santa. And she said, what are you talking about? So I told her that story, and I said, all we will say is that we are Jewish, so Santa doesn't come, because we get our own presents. And that was just what we did.
Yeah. And I think, and this is maybe a tip for, I don't know, you guys, because I think that tact can work just fine,
Sure.
And also, maybe like, okay, that's a little exclusionary, but we figure there will be a time period where my daughter, who is 3.5 years older than my son, will figure out, and the jig will be up. But there's this idea that I've seen on social media that we're planning to practice with her whenever that day comes, of explaining to them that, of course, Santa isn't real, but it's the idea of it. It's sort of, the hope and the magic and those kinds of things. And basically telling her, you figured out the secret. Now you get to be in on it, and you get to help bring the magic to your brother. And so I think there's a way that, I think it's, maybe a little bit different for like your daughters to be like, you get to bring the magic to other kids by staying at home and not celebrating Christmas.
Sure.
It's kind of a weird way to implement that. But if you are someone who has multiple kids and that first one figures it out, instead of being like, don't you dare ruin it for your brother or whatever, like, or your sister, bringing them into it and making it like, hey, you're in on the secret. You're part of the adults club now. And you get to help with the magic, and maybe giving them something to do.
Sure.
Putting out the milk and cookies, and hey, you get to take a bite now because you get to help build the illusion that this guy came down our non-existent chimney because we live in Florida and like
True.
eat some cookies, right?
Right.
And so it also reminds me, I don't know if you've seen the show yet because I know your boy was in it, but Starting Five on Netflix, but there's an episode about Christmas. And I think it's LeBron's family. I could be wrong, but like they're like being recorded on Christmas morning, and like LeBron and Savannah are just going off on how Santa and his reindeer left crumbs all over their floor the night before. And you could tell by LeBron's smirk, right? Because he's got 2 high school age boys, but he's got a younger daughter. And I'm assuming this whole show is for her. And, because this was filmed over the last season. So like his oldest son's in college, right? The jig is up for Bronny and most assuredly for Bryce too. But like he's got a younger daughter. And so they are just going off and like buying into it. I'm like, that's some of the fun that you can, and I think his kids were, kind of smirking and shaking their heads because they just think their dad is a giant cornball and not, necessarily just one of the greatest sports players to ever exist. So, I thought that was a kind of funny anecdote of how no matter how much money or success you have, dads can just be absolute cornballs.
Yeah. Oh, I like that. It's, that's funny. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I don't really know how else to say without, you're right. It is a little exclusionary to say he doesn't come to our house because we're Jewish, but
what are you?
I can't think of a better.
No. Brainstorm it off the air, but like, I don't have a better way to, and I think there's also like, I think there's a way depending on how old your kid is and how mature you think that kid is to be like, hey, yeah, it's a tradition and an old tale. And yeah, it's not real, but also like it brings a ton of people joy. And like you'd be ruining their joy by telling them. So even if you're not bringing them into the magic, it can sort of be like, hey, like you can just know in your heart without like trying to ruin somebody's day. But I think kids are going to be kids and somebody's going to say something that's going to upset somebody. And like knowing that your oldest is a lot like you, I think that there's a very high chance that she will snap back with, well, you know what? That
exactly
is a myth.
Right. But I will say, there were times when I was at a friend's house for Christmas and Santa knew I'd be there because that Santa goes to that house. So I know that if we were ever at my father-in-law's house, if we were ever there for Christmas in a situation where my wife didn't have to work and where they celebrate Christmas there and there's another grandkid, I am sure my kids would also get gifts from Santa because they would happen to be at a house that Santa stopped at, right?
Sure.
So I'm for that. He just doesn't come here,
Yeah, and I think it's got to be one of those things you take it as they come, and you worry about the ramifications and the explanation if and when they get upset instead of trying to come up with the perfect one in case they get upset.
Right, exactly.
So those are kind of some of the big traditions that I really wanted to talk about. I don't know if you had any others that you wanted to highlight to give any people inspiration, or we can move into working on the dad bod because we're gonna record our special Candy Pick'em episode after this.
I just have one more quick one. Yeah. So my kid's preschool does Pizza Friday, where there's an upcharge per slice.
I thought this is where you were going before you said farmers market. Honestly,
yeah. So I was just gonna say, instead of that, what we do is on most Fridays we will order pizza as a family, and we will have Pizza Friday because obviously ordering enough pizza for 4 people, yes, is more expensive than the 2 or 3 slices we could get my kids each, but cost per slice is less. So that's
exactly.
And that way I get pizza.
I will say, I've mentioned this when you brought it up before, that my kids' daycare doesn't charge more for pizza on Fridays. It's included, and that's great and everything. And it is not a tradition in our house, but it's kind of becoming one where I forget that that's a thing that they do at school, even though I didn't pack like a sandwich for lunch. And the number of times my wife and I have just absentmindedly been like, it's Friday, let's do pizza. And the kids get pizza twice in a day is more than I'd care to admit.
Yeah.
So yeah,
pizza's got 4 food, depending on the topping, 4 food groups. Every time.
My kids don't eat enough to make it matter that much.
I'm just saying, in my mind, depending on the kind of pizza, you could have pizza all 3 meals a day, and you would actually hit breakfast, lunch, and dinner. If you believe in the constructs of breakfast food, dinner food, and lunch food.
You could if you weren't picky little children.
Sure.
It is true.
True.
But yeah.
True.
All right. Should we work on the dad bod?
Yeah, I'm in like a time of fluctuation, so this was a good fluctuation week. Last week I was 191.2. Today I'm 189, so great. Fluctuation. Sensation.
There you go. I myself, I feel like I'd been going back and forth a lot on, how consistently I was working out. We had the trip to Scotland. I mentioned before that like I had just sort of hit a wall and burnt out. And then I came back and I like got after it really hard because I was feeling, I guess guilt or whatever, like I got to make it up. And so I developed a workout program that I did not ease into from a weightlifting perspective. It was like the first day I did a ton. And then the next day it was like upper body. And the next day I did legs, and I was just super sore. And so I had to make a decision last week and this week that I'm like, I'm going to scale back on the weightlifting. We're talking 5 days to 4 days and lowering the sets, where I'm just like, it's the process. And I'm not going to gain it all in a week. I have known that on strength muscle for the longest time, like mathematically and scientifically known that, but I've not practiced it. And so like, instead of going as absolutely hard as I can every single workout, I've just started backing off a little bit, trying to find some other ways in my day to move. Because the kids had the dentist this morning, my wife was taking them. I actually got to bike to and from the gym, which was just a nice little bonus. It was only about 15 minutes round trip, but just a nice little way to sort of move a little bit extra in sort of a low stress way, mixing in a little more, basketball shooting, some cardio, some mobility, but just trying to do those things where I'm like, okay, let's do this where I'm not hitting a wall or getting an injury every 2 to 3 weeks because I'm just like going at it like an animal, because like it's one of those things. I think I've said this to you before, when you were doing your like, I'm going to work out every single day of a year kind of strategies, where it's just like, if you burn out by May and I work out 3 times a week for the whole year, I work out more times. And so it's just, and trying to keep that in mind of like, this is not about what I do this week or this month so much as like, can I keep doing this until I'm 40? And I'm sort of having this realization of like, if I try to train like I'm in college and thinking I can recover like I'm in college or like I'm a young adult, and that I'm always going to get good sleep and it's just not happening for me. And so I need to be more pragmatic about sort of the long-term solutions. So that's not to say I won't ramp back up eventually. It's just, just been kind of taking it easy, because I keep feeling like aches and pains and going, I need to like solve this before I keep injuring my shoulder or messing up my back or something like that. And it's just like, it's 2 steps forward, 2 steps back. And I'm just kind of feel like I'm running in place. So got to change something up.
I feel that.
Yeah.
I feel that. Cool.
All right, man. Well, thank you guys for tuning in. I hope that you guys have some awesome traditions, whether that's for Halloween, Thanksgiving, Hanukkah, Christmas, Kwanzaa, New Year's, whatever. I've got a few more that I didn't mention, but if you've got some great ones, drop them in the comments. We would love to hear about some of your awesome traditions so that we can steal them.
Truth.
All right. Thanks, guys. Just a reminder, we will not be here in 2 weeks. We'll be next week with our candy draft. So we will see you for a live and fresh episode in 3 weeks. All right. Thank you, guys.
Yes.
Appreciate you. Have a great evening. Thanks for working on the Dad Pod with us. Any resources that we mentioned during the show will be in the show notes. If you have questions, thoughts, or just want to talk with us, the best place is in the comments on YouTube. We're on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, and Threads at Working on the Dad Pod, and on Twitter at Working on Dad Pod. Following and subscribing is always appreciated. Please rate and review us. That helps get the show to new people. And if you know a dad who would enjoy our show, sharing it with them is a huge help to them and us. Have a great week.